Hey YouTube, the Ghetto Garage is on location today, and we are going to change the rear differential fluid in that 2006 Cadillac Escalade today. Now, we have changed the front differential fluid. I did that earlier this year. I've changed the transfer case fluid, but I haven't done the rear differential fluid only because it's a little bit more involved. What you really should do is there's a cover on the back of it that you should take all 10 of the bolts off, and you have to, I've seen some people not do this, but you have to remove the cover and replace the seal. That's the best way to drain the fluid out of there, and that helps you make sure that there's no gunk built up, and just it's an overall inspection point for the rear differential. So we're gonna replace that seal on that back cover. We're gonna take it off, we're gonna drain the fluid, and then we're gonna fill it through the regular fill hole, and we're gonna show you the process of doing that today. All right, in order to do this job, the things that we're gonna need today is we're gonna need an oil pan to catch the gear fluid as it comes out. We're gonna need the gear fluid itself. I'm using 75 W90 weight, it's full synthetic. It takes 2.5, so I got 3 bottles. We want to put a new gasket on. There was a video out there where someone showed replacing the fluid in the rear differential, and he couldn't get the drain plug out, so he loosened the back cover, which is, you know, encompassing of this gasket here, and then didn't replace the gasket. So that's savage, and we're not doing that. We're going to do it right. Some people might argue that you got to replace the cover. I'm not, but the gasket you really should replace. So we're going to replace the gasket. To give ourselves some room, we're going to need to drop the spare tire, which means you're going to need your tire change kit. That's going to be located wherever your tire change kit is in your vehicle. Mine is in the back off to the left. Safety first always. When you're going to work underneath a vehicle, even when it's not fully jacked up, there is always a possibility it could roll around, so you're going to want to chock the wheels. So these are all the things that we're going to need, and our trusty jack. You want to have a decent jack and get mounted up underneath there so you have room to work as well. So these are all the things that we're going to need to get this job done today, and let's get started. First thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to take this out, because in the GM vehicles, they are a Tahoe or a Suburban or Yukon. That's the way you access dropping down your spare tire. So the next thing that you'll want to do is you want to grab this rod. This is from the kit that you change your spare tire with, and you're going to want to put that in to where it doesn't turn easily anymore. And once you get that going, this is going to be counterclockwise to lower it. And sometimes the spare tires get rusted out and they won't drop down all the way, which is the case with our spare tire. So we're going to have to get up underneath there, try and work on getting that down. So one thing that I want to touch on when you're doing this job or anything in the rear end here is this removal of the spare tire. Now, whoever came up with this design probably was a genius in that there is a safety mechanism, so if this pulley system failed, the spare tire won't drop. But the stupid design of this is the fact that it's underneath the vehicle, it's exposed to the elements. And under normal circumstances, when you do the crank system in here and it drops the cable down, this hook would release and drop the tire down. Now what happens is, after the vehicle is 1 or 2 years old and has seen a winter or two, it seizes up, and you have to get a screwdriver through the tire and push this hook back in order to get the tire to drop. It's a terrible design. I didn't film myself doing it. You can find some videos out there, but it's awful. Anyone who's owned these vehicles knows that ultimately if you had to change your tire on the side of the road, you'd be stranded because GM has this poor spare tire design. So it says patent pending. They shouldn't be allowed a patent on this because it's garbage, and that's just my 2 cents on that. Anyways, I didn't do that. That was there. So some other poor person who owned this vehicle before me suffered this same challenge. But anyways, what we're going to do now is we're going to take off this back cover. All right, before we get started here, I want to just kind of give you an overview on the setup we got going here. So I got the wheels chalked on both sides. Now, it's in gear, it's not going to go anywhere, but I got the wheels chalked on both sides. And I have the vehicle raised slightly, at least during this portion of it, so I can get up underneath there and get everything loose. The biggest challenge that you're going to face here is when you're underneath, you want to be able to have really good access to all of these bolts. All of these bolts all around the back cover here. So we're gonna pop that back cover off. I got jack stands underneath there, and I got a jack. So wheel chocks, jack stands, jack, safety, safety, safety. Can't say enough about safety. You want to make sure that whenever you're underneath the vehicle, that you're working as safe as possible. All right, where we're at right now is before I take that back cover off, I'm gonna just make sure that this fill plug is able to, get a good view on that, is able to be removed. It is a 3/8 inch ratchet fitting here, but I'm gonna try and get that loose, because after I take the cover off, drain the fluid, I'm going to refill the fluid, and that is my fill hole. So we'll be back at you here shortly. All right, so next what we're going to do here is I actually went ahead and got onto each one of these bolts and pre-loosened them. Now you want to be very, very careful. Here up in the northern Midwest here, we got rust. So you're going to want to make sure that you get really good on the bolts and start to loosen them. You don't want to strip them out. They do have a potential to strip. So you're going to want to make sure that you get onto each one of these and start loosening them. It's counterclockwise, so I've gotten some of them loose already. But what we're going to do here is we're going to get the rest of these bolts off. I'm gonna use a drill for the ones that I can get at to make this job quicker. So the biggest thing before you start using a drill or anything like that is you're gonna wanna loosen all the ones that you want to get at, and you don't want to start just trying to torque off a bolt that is rusted, and potentially you could strip the cover of it or the top of it, because if you strip the top of any one of these bolts, game over. You're just going to have to figure out a different way to change that fluid or tap out that bolt. It becomes a much bigger problem for you. So it looks like there's 2 bolts here that I can't get, that my drill won't be able to get at. I'm going to show you my drill here in a second, but I got 2 bolts out just like that. They're right here, piece of cake. And the biggest thing is you want to make sure that you're not going to strip out the top of those bolts. Those are rusty, they're nasty. We're actually going to clean those up before we put them back on. But now, any of the rest of these bolts, I can actually just take off. I can get at them pretty easily. They're all loose, so there's no risk of me wrecking any of these bolts. It's all coming off real nice. You want to have your pan underneath here, because it's going to start to drip fluid, because you're starting to take the pressure off, and it's gonna release that seal, that cover that we have to replace this. But we're making short work of this by using a drill and an attachment on our drill. The last bolt you want to take off on this is the top one. So we're going to just loosen up the bottom. It's going to drop the fluid right into the pan, and the last bolt is going to be right at the top. There's a brake line bracket that's in the way, and we'll be back at you here in a second. We're gonna pop this off. I don't think I'll be able to do this with my finger, but we'll get a little tool to pop that off, and we'll be back at you here in a second. Okay, so there's a number of different ways that you can do this. I'm always overly cautious about getting a screwdriver in here and prying away on it. So plastic whenever possible. So I got this plastic scraper here, and I got this wedged. It's just kind of a junky scraper that I use, but I'm going to use this to hopefully help get this started to be loose, and I can get this pan off and get this going here. Guess not. Got this screwdriver wedged in here. That was about the only way I could do it. Now it's starting to come off, and it's going to drain really well now. Now again, this isn't going to drop on me because I got that top bolt there preventing it from fully coming down. But, we got it nice and loose. So I always caution you using a screwdriver, but today's project we had to. It's the only way that it was coming off, but now I got a lot of the fluid draining, and it's coming out good. So we're going to get this last bolt unscrewed at the top here and get this pan off, or this cover off, and we'll be good to go. Alright, what you want to do is you got to get this all cleaned up. And you know, this is what you encounter in some of these older vehicles. There wasn't even a gasket on here. Someone used just gasket sealer. Didn't even use a gasket on here, and just decided to do the job that way. So what we're going to have to do here is we're going to have to get the face of this all cleaned up and ready for the gasket to go on. And this is where, you know, you might in other circumstances want to replace the cover. We're not going to do that on this one, but this is where other people's work sometimes gets annoying. Okay, so the biggest thing that you want to do here is you want to get some brake cleaner going here. I got a lot of that scraped off, but you get a nice wire brush and you can get the final items cleaned off here. It's really good at getting gasket gunk off, but you just want to get this real clean so the surface is ready to go for the new gasket that's going to go on. Okay, that's it. Alright, so you got a couple things at play here. One of the things that I did do ahead of time is I prepped the area, make sure that I got all the previous gasket sealer off. Got the pan or the cover all cleaned up. But you want to only use the gasket or only take out the gasket when it's ready to go on. It only goes one way, so you're going to see it align here. And I've prepped the top bolt. So I'm going to be starting with this top bolt up here, and I gotta carefully lift this into place here. I want to just make sure that I'm lining everything up correctly and getting things started. So I got a nice clean seal. You don't want to do all this work and then not have it be for none because you didn't take your time and put in a little bit of lock thread or Loctite on here to just make sure that those bolts go in nice and tight and stay that way. But I got a good fit on this gasket. It's lined up really well. I like it. You just want to make sure that everything stays nice and aligned here before you get it too tight. So put the top one on, and I'm just putting a couple in to place, and then I'll go ahead and tighten the rest of. Oh shoot, nothing like spilling a $5 tube of Loctite. It's not very expensive at all. So anyways, most of these should be able to be hand tightened when you're starting them back out and getting them going again. But we'll get the rest of these started and tighten back up, and then we'll be back at you. Alright, so I went around and I hand tightened all of these bolts, and you want to do it in a cross pattern. So you want to do up here, and then down here, and then over here, and then over here. And then now what I'm going to do is, this is a inch-pounds torque wrench, but what I need to do is I need to tighten these bolts to 15 foot-pounds. And I like using this inch-pounds torque wrench because it's smaller. This is still kind of a tight area, so if you get a bigger ratchet, it can be a little bit more difficult. But what's nice about an inch-pounds torque wrench is you can multiply the inches times the foot-pounds that you want to achieve, and then you set the inch-pounds torque wrench to that number. So 15 times 12 is 180. So this converted inch-pounds torque wrench is now set to 180, and I'm gonna turn each one of these bolts until I get a nice click. So that one's tight, and then I'm going to do a cross pattern. So I'm going to go up to this top one up here, and I got that one nice and tight. And then I'm probably going to go over here on this side. That one's tight. And then I can go over to this side over here, and that one's tight. And I can go over here, and so on. So you just want to get all of these tightened to the proper specs. And remember, there's 10 of them, so you don't want to miss any. Alright, so remember at the beginning of this video I was complaining about this pile of junk. Before you put this back together, you want to just get this lubed back up, because you know, if you think you're just gonna put it back up and you won't have to deal with it again, your next car ride, lengthy car ride, you'll get a flat tire and you'll have to take this thing down and it won't work. So just avoid Murphy's Law here. And Murphy's Law, for those of you who don't know, anything that can happen will. And what we want to do is make sure that you just take the time to just clean this up really, really well, so you got a good fluid movement on this enormous GM pile of junk. So just take the time to set yourself up for success next time around, and you'll have less of a headache. But we got the back end all put back together. We're going to be adding the fluid here soon, but we want to make sure that this is working perfectly before we stick the spare tire back up underneath the vehicle. So, all right. So this is ready to go back up. I got that positioned correctly, and this is how this setup works. I just want to start pulling this up. And again, we got that nice and serviced. So this pulley system is going to start lifting the tire up. Eventually. We want to make sure that that line isn't twisted or going anywhere. You don't want to put a lot of pressure on that. So get this nice and centered. It'll stop spinning eventually. It's almost in a balanced position. Wake up the neighbors. But, this is all you do to take your spare off and put it back on. So just get up there and you'll feel it tighten. You just want to give it one more snug, and that way it's not back there bouncing around on you. So you just push on it, and she's nice and tight up in there. So ready to go. Alright, we switched the setup a little bit. Before we had the two jacks in the rear. I was lifting up the rear end to give myself some room to be able to get at that back cover. Now that the back cover's on and I got the spare tire back in, the fill is on this side here. So what I did was I jacked up the front end a little bit, and I'm going to get up in there with my creeper. That's a piece of crap, but it works for now. The wheel's busted because I'm probably too fat for it. But anyways, got the front end jacked up, so I should be able to get under there with some ease to fill the fluid. All right, this is going to be one of the rare times that you got access to something and you can actually tip the bottle up. But that's the fill point for the rear differential. You need 2.5 bottles of this. So I'm going to use this, but there's actually enough room to tip that bottle up. A lot of people will use like a pump system. This is one of the rare opportunities in filling these transfer case differentials, all these service items down below here where there's actually room to tip a bottle. But a lot of people will fill it until it starts to pour out. That's not spec. Spec is 2.5 bottles, so put 2.5 bottles in and you'll be good to go. So I got the front end slightly lifted so I can get my big old butt underneath here, but I'm gonna start to fill this right now. All right, so I'm gonna just get this tipped up in here like this, and like I said, this is one of the rare opportunities where the bottle will tip enough for you to be able to pour all your fluid right where it needs to go without using some sort of tube attachment or pump or anything else. This bottle tips enough for you to just get in here and fill it the way you need to. So I'm going to get 2.5 quarts of this filled in here, and we'll be back at you here in a second when I'm putting the plug back on and be ready to take this thing for a spin. Okay, this is all filled up. I got 2.5 bottles in there, and you just want to get this fill cap put back on. And I like to use a little blue Loctite in there. I don't know if it says that you need to or not, but don't plan on getting in there for a little while, and I want her to be in there nice and snug, so that's just what we're going to do, and we'll get it tested out here in a little bit. So remember when I said at the beginning of the video that I put that screen in there for diagnosis? This is what was in my differential now. I think that fell off when I was moving things around, but this actually flowed out of my differential, and you know, there's just gunk that collects. That big piece might be something that fell off too while I was working underneath there, but see those little granules? That helps me understand the overall health of what was going on in that differential when it was being run. So not too bad, but you know, more than I'd like to see, which also just reinforces the reasons why you should change this fluid and change it with synthetic, a good quality fluid, because this is a moving part, just like your engine that runs all the time, and you want to make sure that you have it well maintained.